Well, what's up, everybody? It is Thursday, October 4th, 10:07 p.m., and this is episode 99 of the MMA Ratings Podcast. We're almost to 100. We have trying to plan something special for you, but even before we get to episode 100, we have a very special guest today. Someone, if you've been following MMA on Twitter the last few probably weeks to months or so, I've been following for a little while, but we have a special guest in Mike Russell, who is someone I've been looking forward to talking to for the last few weeks or so. Mike, thank you for joining us this evening.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, guys.
Definitely, man. We are looking forward to talking with you. And we also, as always, we have my partner in crime, Schwan here, the world's greatest dad. Schwan, how you doing today, sir?
Yeah, I'm just riding on Raphael and Mike's coattails today.
Man, we're going to have you joining on the conversation too. But I mean, Mike, you've been very popular over the last few weeks or so. You've had a lot of different things to say, a lot of interesting things to say, and as someone who has a journalism and sports journalism background, I just want to say I appreciate you and your work, man. I'm looking forward to talking to you.
Thanks. Yeah. It's been pretty crazy the last few weeks. We've had some big names step up and kind of shine a light on some of the work that I've been doing. So it's been interesting to say the least.
Definitely, man. And let's start right there and let's talk about you and your work. Give us a little bit of a background, man. Where are you from? How did you get started in sports journalism? Let's kind of dive deep into that first before we get into the meat and potatoes of tonight's conversation.
Sure. Yeah, I'm from Ontario, Canada, so I'm just outside of Toronto. I started. It was kind of a weird. The way that I started as a journalist was kind of a strange trip, I guess, and a weird path. I started working for. I actually went back to school when I was 30 to take public relations. And my first semester, I was on the Sherdog forums, and there was an ad posted for a UK-based magazine that was looking for someone to do some marketing work for them. So I applied, and I guess there was myself and another guy here from Toronto that got the job, and he kind of just quit on it after a while because we figured out pretty quickly it was non-paid. So I was like doing stuff like setting up like uh, meetings with like places like Chapters and Walmart with the magazine to try to get their magazine into these on these newsstands. And then they didn't have a budget, so they started asking me to write interview questions for them. And it was kind of it was an eye opener when I got the very first magazine. I go to look and see if my byline's there, and it wasn't there because they basically used my questions and gave them to someone else to deliver, so they never gave me credit. So it was like, okay, well now I know how this works. So I got credit on the next magazine, and then the magazine ended up folding, but not before I interviewed the one of the owners of what was called the Fight Network. I guess that's where
Yeah.
Robin Black used to work, and a bunch of people used to work. That was when it first started. I was one of the first, I guess, MMA news guys that worked there. So I got hired by Loretta Hunt and mentored by Loretta Hunt, which was, that was invaluable to me because she was, one of the I guess OGs in the sport that have been doing it a long time. So she gave me a lot of good advice and tips, and I kind of took it and ran with it. So from there, I guess I went and I freelanced a little bit after the Fight Network because they cut their budget. And then I landed at Cage Potato for a couple of years. I was the senior editor there. I replaced Ben Foltz when he went to MMA fighting. And then, yeah, I was there a couple of years, and then I kind of did my own thing after that. Last place I was working for that was a paid gig was Yahoo Sports in 2014, but it became clear when I was working for them that they just weren't interested in me doing any original work, and they flat out told me that they already had, their journalist or in-house journalist was Kevin Ioli. So I left, and I left because it was actually a story on Cody McKenzie that I'd written that they'd said, yeah, go ahead and do it. And then when I handed it in, they said it was too long and that it wouldn't resonate with the readers. So that led me to Cody McKenzie actually was mistreated by the Edmonton Combative Sports Commission. That kind of led me to start digging in on them. And then, with that story, it took me about 2 years to kind of dissect and get through. And then it culminated with me finding evidence that they hadn't registered a bunch of Tim Hagg's medical suspensions when he passed away. So the executive director that I'd been writing about for 2 years that was breaking all these rules, just doing whatever he wanted and ignoring rules and regulations, He ended up getting fired, and now there's like a multi-million-dollar lawsuit that's coming out against him and other people in Edmonton. And he may actually end up going to jail. We don't know 100%. But I wrote a story a year before this all kind of, they figured it out, saying that, he should, should he go to jail because he was guilty of negligence causing death. So it was a long time coming, this investigation, but it just took a death for something like that to happen. So, we look at what's happened here the last few weeks. My other story that was kind of my long game story was a long-running investigation into Ali Abdelaziz, the manager for, I think there's 100 fighters that he manages now, 50 UFC fighters or something crazy like that. But I actually wrote my very first story about him in 2015, and the day that I wrote it was the day that World Series of Fighting decided to fire him, I think as a result of some of the things in my report. Ray Sefo actually called me the morning that they let him go to ask me about my story that was going up that day, just to ask me, the details. But they already knew about Ali's past, so it was no news to them. It was just, the fact that everybody else was going to know about it, I think just became too much of a PR disaster for them. So they, at least on, in public, said they were cutting ties with him. But, I have evidence showing that probably wasn't the case, and there was a lot more going on behind the scenes, that he was involved with. But yeah, it's for me, when I came back from a short break from MMA journalism in 2014, I said I wanted to do something that actually made a difference. And I think I've done that, with the Edmonton case, with I think the Ali Abdelaziz case is going. I'm not going to say too much about where I think it's going, but I've got some new evidence that we've come up with that we're going to include in the first podcast issue, or the episode of the podcast that comes out tomorrow. So lots of work,
Hey,
lots
Mike,
of work we've put in. Yeah.
Yeah. And before we get too far into that, because all of us on this podcast have worked in the MMA journalism, I wanted to kind of maybe have you touch on the fact that, because I don't do the level of work you do. What you're doing is really like life-changing, important stuff. I focus more on analysis and things of that nature.
Yep.
But just like the work you do, it takes a lot of research and time. Like, people think you just watch a fight once or twice and you come up with these stuff. You can't watch it once or twice. You have to really go over stuff to pick it up.
Yeah.
Could you kind of touch on, like, because a lot of people think we make a lot of money. They think we're traveling all the world. They think it's like covering the NFL or the NBA. They don't understand that you're doing all this work on your own dime or around your own jobs or whatever you need to do to make ends meet while trying to provide top-end content that a lot of people don't go to, because it's like they go to clickbait. Whereas, NFL fans are you're talking about their quarterback or their organization, you're getting at least 50,000 people, minimum 50,000 hits, maybe 60, 100,000, just depending on what team it is. Could you touch on kind of the struggle of the mixed martial arts journalists? I've talked about it with Patrick Wyman, who got out of it after he kind of branched out, but since you're still in it, could you kind of let the fans know what the realities of mixed martial arts journalism is?
Sure. Yeah, if you're going to do real work like this, it's very hard to find somebody to pay you for it. And the main reason being is that it's access-based, and it's a beat-based. The beat in MMA journalism is you're inside it. So, you see all these people at the press conferences that are rubbing shoulders with everybody. They've got to see all the people that they're writing about. Nobody wants to, make anybody angry. And there was a quote years ago from when they had the Lance Armstrong investigation into the doping scandal. And they said that it took a reporter that wasn't really part of the beat to expose it, because all the ones that were inside, they were afraid that they were going to do what was called spitting in the soup. You're not going to affect your bottom line just because you want to tell a story. Most people just wouldn't do that because of, you guys have probably seen all the abuse that I've gotten heaped on me on social media and everything else. It's, unless you're getting paid big bucks, and it's not really something that most people want to get into. And that's the problem. And that's, part of the issue was when I went to Yahoo, that I was like, well, you know what? I'm willing to do more work than you're paying me for. You're paying me a paltry amount. I was willing to put in the extra effort, do a 90-minute interview for a $25 story, and they're chastising me for it. That just kind of opened my eyes, that they're like, don't waste your time type of thing. So it's, the game is the way that people are getting paid in MMA, like MMA websites. There's too much of an investment to go into this type of work for the amount of money that they'd get as a return on investment. So it's much easier just for them to regurgitate stories about, somebody's Twitter posts or Instagram posts, or so-and-so said this or so-and-so said that. But there's not much substance to that kind of reporting because, as we know, it's not always the person that's working the Twitter account that's writing these things, or, you can't prove it. So it's almost like shoddy journalism to write a story about something that you can't source, like a tweet or something somebody said about somebody that you can't verify the veracity of. But again, like you said, there aren't a lot of people that are doing this as a full-time job. I was lucky enough to be able to do it for a while as a full-time job and got paid, better than some of my full-time unionized, highly technical jobs. But that's a rarity. And if you want to be, it's sad, but if you want to be part of that, where you're making full-time money from a site like MMA Fighting, MMA Junkie, all of those places, you almost need to, I'm going to say, probably put most of your ethical, I'm not going to say you're unethical working there, but if you have stuff that you feel is important that you need to tell a story about, you probably aren't going to be allowed to tell most of the stories that you want to tell if you work for a site like that, because they'll find out pretty quickly that you're not getting the clicks, which is not getting the money. And the way that they're getting those money from clicks is not how you think it is. They're actually selling us, the users, to people, selling our information to people. So it's a really dirty business when you really get to the nuts and bolts of it. And I've got a story I'm working on now that's going to go into that as well. But, it's all about time and timing. And I've got, probably better to get this Ali story out now while there's some attention on it. So I'm putting, some of my other stuff kind of on the back burner until it's done.
And
yeah, it's a tough business to get in. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, thanks. Something that's been really interesting to me in watching your work and some of the other work that some other guys like Kareem and others are doing is the fan response. So if you can you talk a little bit about what the fan response is within mixed martial arts to the type of work that you're doing? Because I think that that's an interesting aspect of the conversation, because it's quite different than how you see individuals react to other forms of investigative journalism.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I kind of look at it, if you back up and actually look at what we're talking about in a lot of these situations, especially with the Ali story, it seems like it's a not very factual story. Like, it seems like it's fantasy, but I have all the documents and all the evidence proving everything that I've said, but that's the problem, is it just doesn't seem like a real story. So it's easy to dismiss me as being some conspiracy theorist or somebody that's making something up or whatever, because people don't want to believe a story like that is real. So, I get that, but in the same sense, you start seeing like weird, like cultural divides that come out in a story like this, because, you start seeing who the bigots are, and you start seeing who the people that are maybe cheering me on for the wrong reasons are. It's a weird, the internet's a weird enough place as it is, but when you've got that dynamic to it, and then you've got, there's a religious dynamic to the story that really, it has to be told because it's related to the group in general. But I mean, it's been very strange dealing with all of these different people that hate each other, that are fighting over it and everything else. It's just, just how about we just discuss the facts? Let's just tell the stories, discuss the facts. Well, even Karim's work, that deals mostly with Kadyrov, people try to dismiss it by saying that he's got a bone to pick. And that's my big thing, is that I keep getting accused of having grudges because I go after, my subjects. I go after them so vehemently with my facts and everything that I know. But I mean, I did the exact same thing with my Edmonton story. It was almost, actually, there's a tweet out that I put out, I think the night before I started writing the Ali story, that I gave him one more chance to give me an interview because he knew some stuff I knew about him. And I said, something about how I was going to give the same offer to Edmonton. So everybody that's saying, oh, he's got a grudge or something personal with Ali, I don't. We do have we crossed paths once before, but I was actually brought in by a second and third party to try to help them with an issue that he was causing them. So that was my only time I've ever even spoken to him was through this issue that was happening between someone else. And I'm going to detail that on the podcast too. We've got kind of all the players that were involved in that, that'll detail that as well. But yeah, it's a weird thing. Journalism's a weird thing because people either trust you or they don't trust you. And there's no
Mike,
kind of, yeah.
It's hard to interrupt you, but me and Raphael talked about this before. How ESPN's getting into the mixed martial arts
Yeah.
community. Is it part of it that people have a bias, or is this, and this is my argument, that people aren't used to this kind of
Yep.
legitimate journalism? Because in NFL, you can't just shout someone down. Like, they have context throughout it. Yeah, these sort of stories aren't common there, but there's a bigger spotlight, there's more money in the journalism. People are used to investigating a piece of ESPN, and it's like, if you read it, actually go through it, it's like 15, 17 minutes minimum.
Yeah. Yeah, and
There's too much money for clickbait. So you think if MMA fans aren't used to a certain level of detail, certain level of analysis, certain level of research, and that's what throwing them off, because they're just not used to it. It's not the norm in journalism, if you think about it.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point. If you ever want to do a little bit of research, look into Noam Chomsky and look into this all goes back to one of the stories I'm writing. Look up like I said, I'm a PR grad. I've got an honors PR diploma, and I was like class president. I'm on the advisory committee for my PR course. So I study PR quite deeply and all the different effects of what people say and do. Chomsky was actually a brilliant mind that dissected how and why certain stories get printed in the media. So he gave these 5 filters, and the filters are dead on. If you watch that with an open mind and kind of look at how it affects MMA media, it's dead on. It goes by ownership. Who owns these outlets? And if you look, there's some ownership some of the people that have invested in some of these sites who are MMA related investors. So there are all these reasons why they don't write certain stories. So it all comes back to one thing, and it's, as journalists, we are supposed to be the voice of what is newsworthy. And there's actually a quote by John Morgan that somebody sent me the other day in an interview that he did. And our number one role as a journalist, at least mine is, as an investigative journalist, is to inform the public on things that are in their best interest to know. So public interest means it's something that protects the public, that they know. It's like buyer beware. Well, John basically muddied it so that he gave it the same kind of he thinks about public interest like people that have never heard of what public interest is. He thought it meant that it was what the public is interested in. So he said, the quote was, he said, "Is it news because we say it's news, or is it news because it's what the public wants to hear?" Well, that's the opposite of what is news. That's clickbait. If it's what the public wants to hear, you're feeding that issue that, say Conor McGregor said, ate a ham sandwich today, and people put that up. They're just doing that for the clicks. It's our job to tell people what is newsworthy, and it's our job to tell them why it's newsworthy. It's like we have no Hippocratic oath like they have in like the medical field. But we at least should have, certain standards that we stand by and hold by. And I think that's the issue, is that we're lying to people. We're peddling what should be known as click-worthy posts and telling them it's newsworthy, and it's not. You put it at the top of your web page or your website, and it looks like it's breaking news, like it would be on like the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times website, and people are going to think that that's what it is. So we're serving people news. It's not news, and it's creating this new fake news cycle. So yeah, to answer your question, I think that we're very confused about what MMA journalism should look like, and it's because of the quality and because of what we've grown used to and accustomed to receiving from the media. So yeah, it's a problem. It's a big problem.
And Schwan's asked you a fantastic question that I kind of want to continue going into, to kind of let fans know, what is your work process like? Because as you were saying, investigative journalism isn't something that you can just churn out on a daily basis. You can't put out 5, 6, 7 pieces a day or even a week that take the in-depth research and analysis that come along with the topics that you're covering. Walk people through what a typical, and I use that in air quotes, what a typical work cycle is for you as you're working on a piece.
Sure. So typically, you get a news tip from somebody, and the very first thing you have to do is weigh why that person is bringing the tip to you. So it's almost like a litmus test of why? Like, what's the reason they want that story up? Well, a lot of times you'll get a story for selfish reasons. Somebody's got a grudge with somebody, or somebody's done them wrong, or it's a disgruntled ex. There's a reason why they want that news out. Sometimes they want money. I've had people that have offered me stories, and they start asking about money, and then you need to just back away from stuff like that. There's a really good guide if anybody's wondering, like if you want to know where to start as far as ethics go. I think it's caj.ca, and it's the Canadian Association of Journalists. They have an ethics guide, and I have it ever since I started. I've had it on my desktop. It's been dog-eared from when Loretta Hunt actually told me to use it. I think it was directed to her for us to use it by the lawyers when I was with the Fight Network. But you need to weigh why these stories are coming to you first off, and then that's when I just start digging in. Basically, as soon as I start to get a grasp of what the big picture of the story is, you start working your way backwards from there. And then with the Ali case, I'll use as an example. I had very little to go by besides knowledge of some illegalities that he was committing in MMA that I was writing about, and then the actual story about his criminal and terrorist background kind of fell on my lap as a result of me tweeting that I was writing a story about him. And I tweeted at him, and then I got a DM from a stakeholder that had a reason for me to have the story. I kind of discerned exactly why that was, and then I started looking into it, and it turned out to be legitimate. So with that story, I had sources that were contacting me on a regular basis through some of my other stories that they'd Googled names for. I usually start with a list of people that I want to talk to in certain situations. So, if I had, say, a book to start with, I'd start with any name I can get out of that book. And then I've got, I actually took I'm almost done it. I took a private investigator course. So I'll probably be a licensed private investigator by the end of the year, I'm hoping, but we'll see how that goes. But I actually have a few background check services that I use, and then I can start from there to kind of find people that are connected to these people. And it depends on what kind of story it is. With Edmonton, it was easy for me to do it because all of these stories were all kind of out there, and it was just a matter of me connecting with the right people. So the other kind of, I guess, positive fallout from me writing stories like these has been that whenever there's an issue, within the sport that people are like, oh, you should talk to somebody about this, that this needs to get out there. I'm getting calls and DMs from people that are saying, well, can you help me with this? Or what do you think about this? Or, it leads to me getting a lot more work in this field, I think, just knowing that I'm the guy that's been fighting against certain things like corruption and crime. But yeah, there's no really set, and even if you took a course, I think in investigative work, I don't think it would be the same thing. And the biggest issue for me has been, I've got a family, I've got 5 kids, and I had to basically quit, like walk away from full-time, trying to get full-time work, because it would have consisted of me being like, a lot of the people that I know in this field, where I'd have to contribute to like 6 or 7 or 8 different spots. And that's stressful, not knowing how much money you've got coming in and everything else. So I do this while working other jobs, while raising, my 5 kids, and it's not an ezy job. I had a young journalist ask me recently. They said, what would advice be that you would give an up and coming journalist like me who wanted to get into doing investigative work? And I said, well, unfortunately, my advice would probably be find another line of work, because it's not easy. I'll tell you, man, my family, my wife, my kids have put up with a lot of, me not being able to, like, even right now, we're driving out to get my daughter from a school dance. And I was like, well, I'm going to have to switch spots here so I can talk. And, I committed to this, and, no knock on you guys, but it's, when people call and it's a source that you've been waiting on for a month or 2 weeks or whatever, and it's, law enforcement or whatever, you take that call, or you might not get that call. So your day has to be pretty open to be able to switch on a dime. And that's, even with the podcast, I've rewritten the first episode probably 4 times because, I find out that one of the sources that was guaranteed in now doesn't want to be on it. And then I find out that, this story that so-and-so told me here isn't checking out because I've checked it with 3 other sources. Or, now I've found there are new crimes that I have evidence of that have never been mentioned or prosecuted, that I'm like, it's probably more important that we get those out and get the news out about them. So it's tough because, you know, unless you can have 5 or 6 stories going at a time and juggle them, which it's tough to do when you've got, like, I've probably got about 200 hours worth of interviews. I've got about 400 pages worth of police documents for this story.
You there, Mike?
Can you hear me?
Yep, got you now. Good.
Oh, sorry about that. If you're going to do this kind of work, it's not an easy thing. Even if I was doing it full time, 40 hours a week, I think it would still be difficult to be able to put out a lot of work, because it's stuff to be
breaking up a little bit there, Mike.
Help me out when I need them. I've got a guy that I will hire when I need to too, for certain things, because I have had some pushback. I've heard that, you know, Ali's, I don't know, you have some lawyers that.
So you cut out a little bit there.
It's either, can you hear me now?
Yep, we got you. There you go.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, it's because I'm just sitting. I'm actually in the car just outside my house. It's probably clicking in between the internet and the Wi-Fi. Yeah. I guess I've been rambling for a while about that, but yeah, no, it's no day's the same, no month's the same, no week's the same, and there have been times where I've almost walked away on, okay, this is it. This is all I can find. This is all, and then, you know, or you get new information.
You're breaking up just a little bit again. Mike, you there?
I think it might just be switching.
Yeah, he might just be. There you go, Mike.
Yeah, I like detective work, right? I was going to be a cop at one point. I like solving things. I like the challenge of it. But I mean, it's like solving anything, right? I've got some cold case stuff that I've been kind of looking into that I might be able to solve other crimes, and you know, it's not an easy thing to do for somebody that's doing it full time. But yeah, it's definitely I don't know. I think it's more a passion project for me than anything, because it's not a money maker. Again, I feel good that I've been able to make some positive changes.
So I can relate real quick. I can relate to you, Mike. As Raphael knows, I have 4 kids. I have 3 15-year-olds and I have a 5-year-old. So I understand. Yep. It's like, I talk to my family and they're like, it shows that you had all these reads. How much are they paying you for this? Or how much are you getting for this? And it's like, on the side, I work with fighters in camps. So sometimes they'll be in other countries and they'll be sending me messages asking for advice. And I'm like, I might spend, you know, if I have a job in between working, I'm trying to get back to them. They're like, I need this answer right away. And I'm like, I'm not getting paid for this, dude. Like, my job here is paying for me, and you're taking up a lot of time. And it's not that I don't want to put out good content or I don't want to help somebody, but I'm like, this isn't helping my bottom line. And I have kids I have to attend to, and games you have to go to, and a family situation I have to take care of. And it's one thing to disrupt it when you're getting a paycheck. It's nothing to disrupt it when you're getting nothing. There's none of that. There's not that payoff that makes it okay at home. Like, oh, well, this paid for our van, or this paid for our electricity bill. This paid for nothing, and it's disrupting our evening.
Yeah, and that's the thing about with me. Like, and I'll tell you, man, regrets is that I put so much time in. And the hard part for me was, like I said, there were a couple of years where I made better money than I did at, you know, my unionized job. So when you've got a pinnacle of your career where decent amount of money, and, you know, I was talking to actually another reporter on Night Game, and he said, there's so many similarities and a fighter, because he said, you know, fighters kind of go top of the world and they kind of go, and I said, yeah, different between me and a fighter that started and hit the top his way, now he's retiring. I'm doing better work than I ever. You know, I'm not punchy. I'm not losing fights. It's like, this is got work done, and I'm making money than I ever made. I wasn't paid for my work except for that first magazine up until all, you know, way better work. So it's not easy. man. But yeah, my biggest regret is just people, that all this work that I put in for various things that people did it, and it's like shoveling coal into the furnace when the furnace goes out and you for it. So yeah, one that when it comes down to it, just do what's for you. And I some have problems with some of the stuff I was doing, but this is that, especially the last couple of years, these stories kept going more so because I kept finding more, and I kept finding more people that were like especially being victimized. And this was before Tim Hegg even. I felt a certain amount of shut before this happened, but in the same sense, I thought I owed it to a lot of people. They were asking for my help, and I'm not very good at turning down help. Again, it goes back to that Hippocratic oath, like doing this sport for. Well, I'm in this to frame. That's the thing that bothers me, is that people see on with the UFC and the antitrust suit and everything else. First, there is no mixed martial arts. There's no ultimate fighting championship without the fighters, and if you're going to treat them poorly, they're circus animals and not people. Yeah, it's a very way around. So much people taking advantage of that. There's no. It doesn't surprise me that it chooses people.
So, Mike, I want to catch you right there because we just had you, you're kind of breaking in and out. You said you were clicking back and forth between internets. What I want to kind of segue into while we still have some time here is I want to talk about the work that you're doing on Ali recently. Take us back to kind of where that kicked off. What was it that caused you to get so ingrained in that subject?
Like how I got involved
Yes,
looking into Ali?
Sure. Yeah. Take us back to that.
Sure. Yeah, I was actually working for. So I was at Cage Potato until 2000 and I believe 11. So then I stepped away from MMA journalism for about 2 years. I was still contributing to a bunch of magazines and stuff, but I was running a crowdfunding site called Fund a Fighter for 2 years, and that was partially owned by Faraz Zahabi. This guy called Robbie Stein, he owned the building that TriStar was in, and they also owned a management firm, a bunch of other stuff. So they were kind of heavily involved in MMA, and we started helping out guys, sponsors and stuff. And we did this all for free. So first time I ever kind of crossed paths with Ali was we were helping Rick Hahn actually with getting sponsors for a fight, and I think Ali was trying to get him some sponsors too because he knew him through the judo scene, and he had a sponsor that fell through. So then we ended up kind of getting him one, and then our sponsor decided he wasn't going to pay Rick. So I went, I went to Ariel. Well, I didn't go to Ariel, but the story got to Ariel and went to Stephen Morocco from MMA Junkie, and I was actually quoted in the story. Just telling them that we're just here to help fighters. Like anybody that has a problem, basically, they can come to us and see what we can do to help them. And then there was a fighter that was being taken advantage of by Ali. And there was a guy that I knew that was a friend here from Canada that was kind of helping him out with management and stuff. And he was, Ali was trying to force him into signing or staying with this other manager that it turned out that he was actually partnered with, that nobody knew about. It was kind of like a secret, you know what I mean? It was like, we found out after the fact that that's why he was trying to make him stay, because then he would have made money off this guy illegally. So the guys from Fund a Fighter actually kind of, I guess you could say it might have been illegal, but it wasn't really illegal because they didn't benefit from it. But they backdated a contract for this fighter, just so that they could make Ali and this other guy back off, that it was a management contract. So they're like, yeah, we already signed them, so you can't do it. So that was that. And then we get a call from the fighter that was having issues, and Next thing you know, Ali's trying to bench him, and he's trying to do all these things to him, and it was like, we're like, he can't do this. This doesn't seem like legal. So, we battled with Ali a little bit. We kind of, and we were right. We had all the evidence in the world that he was lying and doing everything wrong. But so that was the story that I originally was going to tell, because I had contracts that he had been sending people saying, sign over the rights to your fighter to me, and I was taking a certain percentage. And I tried to battle with World Series of, well, not battle. I contacted them back then and complained about it, and I was going to go further with it. And then I just kind of walked away from MMA. And then Paul Gift and John Nash put out that story about Ali possibly breaching Nevada state laws by being a matchmaker and a manager at the same time. And that came out of, they got documents from a World Series of Fighting global lawsuit that they had against World Series of Fighting. So it was kind of like nobody really knew that that's what he was doing, was he was breaking this rule or breaking this law. Well, I contacted them and I said, hey guys, I've got proof that he was doing that. I've got documents, I've got people that'll go on record about it. And I've got the whole story about how he literally was doing this and how he was trying to use other people. And, it was almost like a pyramid scheme that he had going of other people trying to help him out. So yeah, that was the story I was going to tell. And then, like I said, it just fell on my lap, the other story, because I was contacted by a World Series of Fighting exec to say, hey, look into this other story. We all kind of were informed about Ali while he worked here by somebody who sent us an email. And, everybody sat in a room and watched the preview for that book that Ali contributed to in 2014. And, I'm like, huh. So, I start looking into it thinking, well, what will I find? Because they never really told me what the story was, just to look up, NYPD, FBI, all that kind of stuff. And, I'm pretty good at research. So lo and behold, I find this book and I'm like, wow. But the problem was, it's just one book. I put the story out based on the one book and a couple sources that I'd spoken to. And, but the problem is I couldn't name a lot of the sources that I spoke to because they were either afraid to talk. One of the NYPD officers that did talk to me on the record, and all he said was basically he couldn't talk, but don't trust Ali. Like basically to say, everything he says, fact check, because he lied to us profusely, basically. And Ali called the NYPD and tried to have him arrested for talking to me. So everybody that's like, oh yeah, why didn't the story come out sooner? I think you're lying. Why aren't you just releasing it? It's like, well, there were a lot of obstacles. There was a lot of interference going on. And even now, Ali has called a bunch of the sources that he knows I've spoken to, because I've named them in interviews, not by name, but just by description. And he's threatening to sue them. He's telling them that they're going to get something from his lawyer. So, it's again, they've got more reason not to talk than they do to talk. And then when you've got somebody like that that's trying to intimidate and scare them, it's like, yeah, it's one of those things. So to me, that was it. I always, it was always about treatment of fighters. And it went back to that. Well, now I find out there's more than just this one fighter who Ali was trying to handcuff into contracts and trying to screw with their livelihood. So, I think it paints a real different picture of the guy that everybody thinks that he is, that all he cares about is helping his fighters and everything else. And I think it all goes back to, is he helping his fighters or is he helping himself? Because he's actually taking money from all of these transactions, even the fact that I found these two sons that he abandoned that he doesn't pay child support for. It's like, just kind of, it speaks to the true character of a man. When we're talking frankly tonight about how, we're concerned about the amount of time we're putting in away from our kids. And then you've got someone like that saying he takes care of the families of his fighters, but he doesn't take care of his kids at all. It just speaks to maybe the type of person that he really is. So that's the story that I'm trying to tell, is just the duplicity, I think, in Ali's life from, the time he landed in America right up until now, that he's kind of used all the same techniques and tactics to get where he is. And I can see it all coming back again in MMA.
I have a question real quick.
Sure.
You ever think, because even though it seems that he's involved in some crooked stuff and maybe he's benefiting from these, he's getting some money out of these fighters because he's double dipping or playing multiple roles. Do you think that there's a certain amount of backlash coming towards you because your thing is, I don't want the fighters to be mistreated. I want fighters to be taken care of. And even if he's getting money he doesn't deserve, he's helping some fighters get opportunities and paychecks and paydays that they wouldn't normally get. Like Sajara Eubanks, for example, it's not by accident that she's in this position that she's in now. And, she made a point to thank him, and other fighters have thanked him for the contract he got him and how he set him up. Do you think there's fans or maybe people associated with camps who resent you for that? Because they're like, if you mess up with this guy, it might hurt my favorite fighter's payday. You say you're out to help the fighters, but now you're attacking the guy who's getting them paid.
Well, see, and that's my response to that would be simple. Is he getting fighters paid that deserve it and getting fighters opportunities that deserve it, or are they getting those opportunities because of his affiliation with people like Sean Shelby and Mick Maynard?
But
and true,
but some people say that as a fighter, some people feel all those fighters should get their opportunities anyways because fighting such a I mean, I argue this against people who fight, but they say it's such a dangerous job, and any opportunity they get is well deserved, whether they deserve it or not. Any opportunity they get is well deserved because they put their lives on the lines for us, which isn't necessarily true either. But you've heard that spiel before. So how would you respond to that?
Yeah, the bigger picture of that is this, though. This all goes back to fair treatment. Well, fair treatment for me is an even playing field for everybody. And Ali has literally used, I'll give you one example. There was a fighter who basically rolled his dice, and they offered to renegotiate his contract before it was up. And that's a common thing for them to do. They'll do it with like 2 fights left. And then if you win that fight, then you don't have any leverage over them, right? But if you lose the fight, they have leverage over you. So this fighter rolled the dice, lost that fight before renegotiating, and they just shut him down because he was asking for more money. But it was him that wanted the more money, but his management then became scorched earth with the UFC matchmakers. So what happens? Ali rolls in and says, hey, would you like me to contact them for you? And he's like, yeah, great. That'd be great. Gets the exact same offer that they offered him before. And then Ali signs that guy, right? So it's like he didn't really do anything that anybody else did, but he kind of abused his relationship to get that. And that's the problem with that is, again, it's not a fair playing field for everybody. And everybody says, well, yeah, well, you get what you can get. Well, then the impetus is, and the exception is that you either get it through Ali or you don't get it through anybody else. And that gives another issue, is that then he gets, the image of working with the UFC. And he actually testified for the UFC in the antitrust suit. He actually did a testimony for them where he basically said that they shouldn't be revealing, salaries and everything else. And you talk to any manager, there's not a manager that I know that says that you shouldn't reveal salaries. Maybe the ones that are making way, way more than everybody else, but those aren't the people that even care that if there's a union, right? Like Conor McGregor will probably, unless he's doing it in solidarity with like some of his teammates, he will probably never come out and say a union's a good idea because it doesn't help him. So, there's the haves and have-nots, and some of the haves get it because of, whatever reasons, like Sage and Paige get it because they've got the it factor. You've got other people that are getting it on their merits of fighting, and then you've got these other people that are getting it just because Ali is, sitting and drinking, or actually he doesn't drink, but sitting at the bar after events with Mick Maynard and Sean Shelby. And, I get messages all the time from other managers saying how bad that looks, that the guy that's supposed to be hard battling at the table with them and negotiating is buying them drinks or, sitting and laughing with them only at this table all night. And it's, to me, it's a bad look anywhere. If it was any other sport, you'd look at it and say, well, that's wrong. That's a conflict of interest, and even in boxing, there's certain rules that govern boxing that we're not governed by because of the Ali Act that isn't really covering us. And the UFC is fighting vehemently against the Ali Act being put in place because it's just going to cost them money. And they're not going to be able to just, make up rankings and make up titles and do what they want. There's going to be some semblance of actual rules. So that would be my argument. If people are like, hey, who cares? He's making all this money for people and everything else. Well, you know what? That's fine and dandy. But what about the kids he owes 50 grand to that, he should have actually had to pay that before he got a license in Nevada? All these rules are in place to protect society. They're not just in place to, give Ali a hard time, and that's the way that he plays a lot of things, is that it's poor him. But yeah, to me, it's the bigger picture of level playing field. You shouldn't have to just, go through one person, or as some people say, sell your soul to the devil just so you can get a chance at something that you should have gotten otherwise. So yeah, long-winded way of explaining that.
Shot. You want all the managers to have the fair shot, not
just
leeway.
There shouldn't be. There shouldn't be, like, it's like a monopoly if you have to go. Like, that's 100% with World Series of Fighting. It was a monopoly. And you had to go through Ali if you wanted a better paycheck. Most people did. You even look at Vinny Magalesh. If you guys ever get to interview him, ask him why he went from calling Ali the biggest scumbag Joe Silva wannabe in the sport to less than a month later signing with him and saying how great of a guy he was. You don't flip-flop like that. If you've ever been mad at somebody before, you don't publicly tell somebody they're the biggest, POS, everything else, and then flip that like he's your brother and your best friend. That was just a weird 180, but that's what it was, man. And actually, I was talking to Miguel Torres about this recently. He said there are certain people in the sport that would, give up their mother to make a little bit of extra money because the opportunity. Well, how would somebody want to be associated with a guy with Ali's past and the things he's been alleged to have done and everything else? And it's like, well, you know what? Money buys, you can look the other way if you're really poor, you're not making much money, if somebody's going to give you money. Some people do. I don't. I've walked away from jobs that, I've been questionable about what they're asking me to do for money. And I'm just like, you know what, that's just not me. But some people are desperate, right? So, I guess it's just who you are and how you want to be perceived and how you want to, be known in your life. It all comes down to that. But fighting, again, is not a sport that I would suggest people go into just because of the lack of money that you can make in it unless you're at the top echelon.
Yeah, me and Raphael have actually talked about that. And I just have one more thing to say, because
sure,
fighters is very individualistic. And a lot of people, like, Leslie Smith is trying to evoke change. The thing about it is there's two reasons that hinders things, is because fighters are very individualistic. Jose Aldo, other people talk about paychecks and managers until they get paid, then they stop talking. Jose Aldo was complaining, he got paid, he shut up. Donald Cerrone was complaining till he got paid, then he shut the fuck up too. They all do that. And secondly, the main thing is, I've compared this to a social movement. With me and Raphael were talking about this. Everybody wants to be the hero. Like, everybody wants to be the name that's remembered. And for any movement to go forward, somebody has to be willing to essentially take the bullet and die, and not be remembered and be an infantryman instead of the Air Force guy who dropped the winning bomb, or whatever you want to call it. I don't know how to put it. But everybody wants to be in to get the benefits, and not everybody's going to win. Somebody has to lose for other people to win. And in mixed martial arts, nobody's willing to lose on somebody else's behalf. I'm looking out for me. We're all a team until it comes time to cash their checks. And that's why the fighters are at a constant disadvantage, because it's wild, wild west out there. Nobody's willing to take a stand because they don't want to lose their, like, you walked away from jobs. I've walked away from jobs trying to do the right thing for something. Most people aren't doing that. They're going to get theirs and then complain about it after the fact, once they're out of it. When they have no power or no say, then they'll make a stand. Nobody cares when you're on a 4-fight losing streak or you're out of the UFC. We care when you were signing your big contract and you had the belt around your waist.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And again, I go back to Miguel Torres because, I've talked to him quite a bit about this. He was top 3 pound for pound in the world between, him, Fedor, and I'm going to say maybe, I don't even know who it was, maybe BJ Penn at the time. And, he had a fall from grace. He had a bunch of stuff happen, injuries, and, I'll get into some of it on the podcast about why he lost his camp at TriStar and everything else. And, it's a very fickle sport. And I said that. I said, it's a very unforgiving sport. He said, well, it's brutally honest. He said, he said, the thing about MMA is that people want to know what you're doing for them right now. And if you're not doing anything for them right now, they'll find reasons to cut you down for what you're not doing for them. And he said, he said people are selfish that way. But the problem is with fighters is I don't think that a lot of people sit and think that these are human beings. People think that, we want to see you punch each other in the face, so you should do it when we want you to, not, oh, great, your mother died, or, you broke your arm, or anything like that. They don't want to hear these excuses. They just want you to take this guy out of the closet, put him in, like Rock'em Sock'em Robots, and that's it. Well, there's a lot more to this than meets the eye with a lot of things, especially we're looking at a lot of brain injury and stuff now, right? People are fighting for as little as $300. Some people fight for free, and in the UFC, the lowest paycheck that you can get is about $12,000. Well, what happens when all that brain damage comes and you're already gone from the UFC for 5 or 6 years, and, you bump your head one time and even though it was, cumulative, you're not getting covered because they can't prove where you got all this brain trauma from. There's a lot more, I think, to look at in the bigger picture of things that we don't look at as fans, because it's a difficult conversation to have. You know, I know fighters that are going through some really tough times right now from head injuries, and you know, I've seen even Tim Hag before he died, like he was having some issues. But the problem is, even when you go back to these managers and everything that are like, you know, taking care of these fighters, well, is taking care of your fighter putting him in a fight that you can make money off when he should be retired? Or is it, you know, there are some managers that don't really care about anything but money. And that's the other thing. You don't have somebody to put a hand on your shoulder and tell you it's time to retire, then you know, it's a scary premise that we've got a lot of guys that are probably fighting when they shouldn't. You know, look at guys like James McSweeney, had a seizure, was told he probably should never fight again. You know, he was having vision problems in one of his eyes during a fight. And then, you know, I talked to the Association of Ringside Physicians just to get their point of view. And they're like, yeah, we say that if you've got epilepsy, you should never fight. It's just not something you should do. Like, so much could go wrong in a fight. Well, then, you know, he had his pseudo manager arguing with me that I didn't know what I was talking about. I'm like, I have his interview. He actually said that he, you know, had scarring on his brain, and he listed everything. Well, instead of doing the right thing and discussing it, this manager had that video taken down so that there's no evidence on the internet anymore. So it's like, you're defeating the purpose of what we're like. I'm not doing this because I'm trying to be mean to James McSweeney. I'm doing this so we don't have another Tim Hag on our hands, right? Like, it's a big deal to the sport to even have a death. And even though it was boxing for Tim Hag, everybody went back to UFC fighter Tim Hag. You know, that was the talking point for everybody, because that was what he was remembered as. But yeah, it's you know, if we're not all going to be caretakers of the sport in whatever capacity that we're in it, then, you know, what are we doing? You know, if people don't care about how they leave the sport when they leave it, or, you know, they don't care about the integrity of it, they don't care about the safety of fighters, what are you doing here, right? Like, do you even really like the sport if you're not trying to protect the longevity of it?
So you actually brought up something good there, and I want to ask you one more question before we talk about what you're releasing, kind of give you opportunity to promote that. But when you think about your work, what is the goal? What is the outcome that you're looking to create? Is it just more awareness, or do you want to see action occur from your work? What is the final goal?
You know what? I was talking to Loretta Hunt a few years ago, and this was kind of what prompted me to get into doing more intensive investigative work. She asked me what the piece was that I was most proud of that I'd done in my career. And at that point, I think I was like 9 years in, and I had a hard time thinking about it, you know, because most of the stuff I did were like feature stories. You know, I did a lot of news work in the early days, but it was mostly like Canadian, you know, this guy's fighting this guy or whatever. It was all kind of very, I guess it was not in-depth reporting. So that kind of prompted me to get more into more in-depth reporting. And then, you know, I guess the last couple of years I've established myself as, you know, there's different types of journalism and investigative journalism. There's what's known as advocacy journalism, which are like people that say, oh, this is what should be done. Me, I'm more, I guess you'd call my brand of journalism accountability journalism, where I'm the one that's calling these like athletic commissions and saying, hey, I found this, what are you going to do about it? Or the governor of Nevada and saying, you know, this is a problem, what's going to be done? Can I get comments? So rather than just kind of sit back and tell people this is what should be done, you know, maybe you should do this, or maybe somebody could change it. I'm the one that's like physically trying to make change, I think. So like with the Tim Hag case, I'm actually going to be part of their, there's a lawsuit. I'm going to be helping the Hag family with the lawsuit against the city of Edmonton. So, you know, stuff like that. I think that as far as, I was actually talking to someone today about, you know, my website was 2 subjects, and it's been 3 years that I've had it up. But this, you know, person that's in the MMA community that's been around probably longer than I have been said, well, it's a pretty good legacy for you to have that, you know, in your 3 years of writing independently, you've basically like proven wrongful death. You've had 2 dangerous people removed from their jobs. You've had, you know, there's a lot of stuff that you've done, and, you know, that's only 2 stories. Imagine if you could do this full time. So that's kind of my goal, is that, you know, if I can do it, I want to be able to maybe do it more full time. And, you know, if my fundraising campaigns take off and I can do it too, I'd like to bring guys like Karim in, and we've talked about, you know, bringing him on to do some work for me. And, you know, if we became the #1 stop for investigative journalism, that would not at all, you know, upset me, because that's kind of what I've always wanted to do. But I never really wanted any contributors before because I couldn't afford to pay them. And I said that I wouldn't let anybody ever work for free. I had offers, all the time from people saying, "Hey, could I come and write for you?" And I just said, well, first of all, it's kind of just my site right now. And, I don't want to just kind of stick stuff on just because, you want to do a fight preview, and it's not really kind of the brand of journalism I want to do. But if I could do it, I'd love to be able to bring on, I was an editor for a few years, like a senior editor, where I had my own news team, or sorry, my own contributor team that, I mentored. That's something else I've always wanted to do is, and I do it. I get people like all the time, like young journalists, like emailing or texting or DMing and asking advice. I'd love to be able to take some kids or grown adults under my wing and show them kind of, my style and how I do, what I do. So, I'm definitely not like, I'm not the expert or the be all and end all, but I've got a pretty good grasp of how you do it, and some tricks and stuff that I can teach people. But I just think that if we started a more of a movement that this is the way that journalism should look like in MMA, then that's how we change things. So that's my goal, is to kind of hopefully let people know that you don't have to just be happy with what you've got. You can kind of vote for what you like by going and supporting people like me. So yeah, it's not if it doesn't work out, then unfortunately I'm probably going to step away. And it's not, everybody's like, oh, don't make threats that you won't keep and everything else. Well, you know what? I think I'm 42, and I think I've the last 3 years I wouldn't say having to do it for free, but the fact that I've put out all that I have for free, I just can't do it anymore for free. So whatever I do make from my crowdfunding campaigns that'll kind of dictate how much effort I put in. So, it's not, it's growing, and it's getting there, but it's, I basically, as it is right now, I have enough that it would maybe cover me for like maybe a week of work if I was lucky, maybe half a week of work. So, it's not definitely not a month's worth of work from what I'm making on Patreon right now. So, I see once everything's released, it'll probably go up because everybody's kind of just supporting me on blind faith right now, because all I put out is a couple preview videos and, some of the info that they've read on Twitter and stuff. I think once the actual product is out and people start listening and talking about it and stuff, and very first episode for sure is going to be free. We might even put out, because it's not actually an episode of the actual podcast. It's more of a primer and a prequel. It's going to be free, and we haven't decided if actually episode 1 will be free as well. So lots of stuff coming. We've got about at least 6 to 10 episodes planned just on this one season, on this one subject, Ali Abdelaziz. So it's going to be a pretty big one, but I think that was the only way to do it, was to break it down into digestible pieces, and for me to tell the story. So I kind of, you don't have to really look up who all these groups are, these people are. I'm going to be the one that kind of guides you through that part of the story and explains all the intimate details of everything that I've learned in the last 3 years.
So that's a perfect segue there. Let us know where we can find your work, where we will be able to find your work, when it's ready to launch, and how we can support you going forward now and in the future.
Sure. So you can always, most of my updates are always going to be on Twitter. So it's Twitter/Mike Russell MMA, all one word. I've got a Patreon page that I just started. It's definitely not finished, but I keep adding. I've actually had a bunch of incentives added. So we've got, a bunch of signed cards and stuff that I've had that were donated from one of my backers who's, there's no conflict there because he's just a fan that decided he was going to send me a bunch of stuff. I've got some other signed stuff that we're going to give away. We've got, for certain tier levels, some of the giveaways will be like fine art postcards, and there's some interesting stuff that is on there that we're going to be adding more stuff. But for a $5 buy-in, you get access to all of the podcasts, which is probably worth its weight in gold, because there are going to be at least 4 episodes a month that you get for that $5. So for less than a cup of coffee or a newspaper, you're going to be able to listen to a 40-minute to 1 hour investigative serial podcast. So it'll be like in the same style as like Serial, or I don't know if you've heard any of the other podcasts like Caliphate or Dirty John, or there's a whole host of serial type investigative podcasts. So it's going to be, again, it's going to be confusing to people because nobody's done this in MMA yet. All the podcasts are typically, people talking like this, which is not to take away from, that's where some of the best, conversations that I've heard have been just people talking about the sport and their passion coming through. But for me to be able to tell this like a news story had to be done with like a scripted narrative and telling the story filled in with actual interviews from all of the different players in the story. So yeah, you can if you're wanting to support it, there's Patreon / Real Fight Stories. I've also got somebody requested that I set up what's called a PayPal.me account. So for that, if you just want to give a little bit of money there and not have to worry about the monthly payment, or you just want to dig in, we will give you access depending on if you make a contribution that way too. So it's paypal.me / Real Fight Stories as well. So all of those channels will be where you'll be able to find most of the info. I'm going to have my actual website, which is realfightstories.com, back up soon. I'm going to probably add some forums there. We've got some other stuff that we've been working on that we're going to probably add, but I took it down to do some changes to it. But I knew that there was some factually incorrect info that I have since been able to confirm was false, that was written in one of the books that Ali contributed to. So I thought, you know what, I'll just keep these stories down and then just retell them the right way from start to finish with the podcast. So I think that's probably what I'm going to do. I may or may not put the other stories back up, but I know for sure that I'm going to correct a lot of the facts that were incorrect with the podcast. So yeah, that's how you can get at me. I have Instagram as well. I think Mike Russell MMA. I don't use it as much as I should, but yeah, any way that you need to get in touch with me. I'm usually pretty good at getting back to questions too, because people have a lot of questions about the podcast and what it's going to entail and stuff. So I try to get back to as many people as I can, but if I don't take it personally, just send me another message.
Well, I just wanted to say again, man, thank you for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you for your work, man. You're doing some great stuff out there, and there is a place for your work. I'm going to make sure that I support you, and hopefully everybody else will, because I definitely think you're needed in the world of MMA and sports journalism.
I appreciate it, guys.
And Mike,
yeah,
I understood your point of view. Like when we were talking earlier, I just know how people's line of thought works. So I'm like, this is the question they would if he was there. So I'm just going to hit him with it so he can address it. So moving forward, maybe it clears up some questions or concerns about where you're coming from and why you're coming from there. Because I follow you on Twitter. So I see the line of thought. So I'm like, I'm going to take the point to bring the question to him so people won't be like, oh, they're dancing around things. They're not coming right with questions.
Absolutely. No, and I understand that. I knew that. I knew it wasn't like a personal or anything like that. You're devil's advocate. But again, man, that's the thing. Like, should you have to go, just because it's the devil and it's the person that they're telling you have to deal with, should you have to make that deal with the devil? And that's what a lot of people said, is that they didn't want to make that deal. And then when they didn't, especially through World Series of Fighting, when they didn't sign through Ali, they were punished for it. So, it creates this kind of fear in MMA that people are kind of tied to. It's either you play the game with the people they tell you to play it with, or you don't get to play at all. And that's, again, that goes back to, things that you'd see in organized crime, where it's like you have to deal with a certain agent. So to me, I just want everything to be on the up and up, and I want everybody to have the same chances and opportunities without having to, deal with certain people, because it's like a monopoly that way.
That's definitely very true, man. So with that in mind, I just want to say thank you again. We're going to go ahead and continue on with the show, and I appreciate you taking some time out for us this evening.
Cool, guys. Thanks. I appreciate it. I'm sorry about the audio issues. If I was a little bit more prepared, I would have had everything kind of underway. But yeah, I had to go pick my daughter up from a school dance that we didn't know she was going to. So,
hey,
I guys, show how, because I got kids running around.
Yeah.
I'm late for my own show all the time.
I know, man. I'm going to be late for my own funeral. That's the thing. There's everybody says there's regular time and there's Russell time, but when you got 5 kids, man, it's hard to get everybody everywhere they have to be at the same time.
Exactly.
Okay,
well,
guys.
Right, we appreciate you, Mike.
Thanks. You too. Have a great night. I'll make sure that you guys let me know if you need copies of the podcast and stuff, and I'll make sure you get on the list.
Will do, sir. I appreciate that.
Okay. Thanks, guys. Have a great night.
So that was a great conversation there with Mike. We appreciate having him in on the show. I think that his work is definitely going to be pivotal to what's going on in the future of MMA. I think it's just kind of what's needed in the industry today. Schwan, that
I
was a
agree.
good
I
session.
agree. He was a great guy. There's one thing I want to say, and it doesn't just apply to his line of journalism, but to anybody. For people who like these, especially the MMA journalists, we don't get paid a ton of money. There aren't a lot of opportunities. So if you want like a certain analysis or preview or articles, you need to really support it. You need to send it to as many people as possible. You need to let your money speak or your clicks speak for that, because that's how people get better opportunities. That's how people end up having salary so they can do it full time. You can't just say I like the content and then not do anything to push it forward, because the content can't exist. If I got, like Mike said, he's got 5 kids, I got 4. I can't afford to routinely pump out high level content when I know I got 4 kids and need me to be doing something else that's going to make us money. So it's not just on my behalf, but for any person who provides content that you enjoy, you have to find a way to support it, and you have to put your money where your mouth is so that you continue to get that. You can't just say, "Oh man, it's such stop doing it." Well, I got a family to provide for. I don't need these kids. Don't get mad at me. I have to look at the same.
True, man. You're breaking up a little bit there, man. So I want to let's get that straightened out as we turn to a couple of news pieces. Actually, let's touch on this quickly. We have the news that's going around about the UFC 230 main event where we have Valentina Shevchenko fighting Sijara Eubanks for the women's flyweight title. What do you think about that? Is this the right move to make?
We discussed it. I don't have a problem with it. Sajara actually has a legitimate win at flyweight, and she already, even though it was in the house, but the house rankings on Tough kind of spilled over into the actual division. So she beat Roxanne Modafferi and she beat Lauren Murphy, who were both highly ranked flyweights at the time. And Roxanne was a highly ranked flyweight before the show. So she's got as much claim to it as anybody else. I think it makes sense. Some people don't like it because it's not a name fight. But as far as legitimacy, it's more legitimate than Valentina versus Joanna. I mean, I don't see anybody can even argue that as far as legitimate sports competition. Now, money-wise, I don't know what it does. But as far as legitimacy, I approve of it.
So why do you think a lot of people are having such a harsh time on this? Is it because it's the matchup itself? Is it because they are no longer getting the opportunity to see Dustin Poirier and Nate Diaz fight 5 rounds? What is it exactly that you think that they are turning on this so quickly?
I think it's a matchup. I mean, honestly, they wanted to see Joanna versus Valentina. Everybody would have been okay with that being the main event just because of the caliber of fighters they are and the things they've done in the cage so far, and plus the history they have of each other, and they're both strikers. I essentially think that's it. I mean, Nate and Dustin are more of a more even fight, at least by the fans saying, but people would have been okay with Joanna versus Valentina. The simple fact of the matter is Sajara is the one who's going to be hurt by this because people don't consider her world class, and because she didn't make weight the first time, she's going to catch a lot of flack for that. Honestly, to be fair, it should have been Nico versus Sajara before Valentina even came into play, but they needed something to legitimize the title fight, so they went with the fighter who's been fairly accomplished at another weight class. It's just a matchup, essentially. That's all it is. If it was Joanna and Valentina, you wouldn't hear any complaints about this. Not a one.
So I think you said something interesting there because I do agree with you that even if Eubanks wins, she's going to be marginalized immediately. I think Shevchenko can kind of build herself up, with that title just because of she's the individual that the UFC wants to promote. They want her in that position. But if Eubanks somehow pulls out a win at UFC 230, there's no way she's going to get the same type of proper treatment. She'll probably be in a position that's worse than any other champion to ever hold a title in the UFC.
Well, she might have one hope. She is represented by the guy we just spent an hour talking about. So she might have some leverage. I'm not saying it'll work, but she might be in a better launching point than we think she is because she's got that guy in her corner, and maybe he's going to make sure that she gets certain opportunities and a certain amount of notoriety. I'm not saying it'll be the right amount, but she'll start off at a better point than Nico did because Nico was a champ for how many months, and we never even heard them talking about it.
Very true. Good point there. Good point. Dustin Poirier and Nate Diaz at 165. Is that something that you wanted to see? Do you want to see a 165 weight class?
I personally wouldn't mind it. I mean, in between the two weight classes, 170 and 155, there's enough depth in there that they could lose a lot of people. It would open up a lot of opportunities for guys to get title shots and to work their way up rankings. Because some guys, 155 is so deep, you got to put like a 7-fight win streak together before you can get a ranked opponent. Look what James Vick had to do before he got a highly ranked opponent. It was like, what, 5-6 fights in a row just to get a lower top 10 ranked fighter? So I don't mind it, actually. I think it's a good idea. And I think a lot of fighters would support it too. I think there's a list of fighters who are ready to jump right into it if they made one. I don't have a problem with it. It's similar to boxing, but these weight cut things I think are going to start becoming more of an issue moving forward, and they need to do something to address it. And this would be a perfect avenue, I think. I believe.
Good. So we have a hell of a fight card to cover in this Saturday's event with UFC 229. At the top, we got to go right to it, man, and talk about Khabib Nurmagomedov and Conor McGregor. This has the potential to be the biggest fight in UFC history. Dana White's talking about it's trending towards 3 million buys, which some people think is not impossible for them to hit. This is a fight that has legacy implications for both men, and it's going to impact a lot of the division across the board. Hell, if Conor wins and he demands a 165-pound division, they're going to make one. So, with so much on the line here, Schwan, what do you think is the most important thing we should look forward to, or we should watch closely when Herb Dean says go on Saturday?
The biggest thing you should watch, really, I think the biggest thing to watch is kind of how Khabib has to react to things he hasn't faced before. On Khabib's side, he hasn't faced a guy with real crisp footwork. He hasn't faced a guy with real crisp hands. He hasn't faced a guy who isn't going to be fearful of taking chances with him. Khabib's usually been in a position where he takes the lead and guys are so fearful of being taken down or him getting his hands on him that they essentially don't fight with any sort of structure, any sort of layers, any sort of trickiness. It's all very obvious. Big up, wind up kicks, very big lunging punches, and they try to run away from him. McGregor is going to stick to his plan. He's going to work combinations. He's going to set traps. He's going to be willing to back up. He's going to be willing to stand his ground. He'll be willing to pressure. So the question is, what do we see Khabib do against something he's never had a guy do to him before? Nobody's ever had any composure in how they fight him. Everybody comes fighting scared, trying to stay the hell away from him. I don't believe Conor's going to do that. I think Conor knows he might get taken down. I think he accepts that, and he's willing to take that chance to see how tough Khabib really is. Is Khabib really unstoppable? We're going to find out, because Conor's not going to hold back here being taken down. I believe Conor's a good enough grappler to hold his own in spots, and I believe he wants to test his chin. He's not going to be scared off. He's not going to be Edson Barboza running away. It's going to be a guy coming to put some heat on him, and that's something Khabib has not faced as of yet. For Conor, the biggest issue is can he handle it when he gets into these grappling exchanges? We know how dynamic he can be, but if he's forced into grappling exchanges, can he maintain that explosiveness? Can he maintain that timing? Can he maintain that cardio? Because if he gets him out of there quickly, he's going to have to go round after round. Can he maintain his poise and sharpness if the fight goes past one? If it goes past two, it goes in it. We know he tends to get a little bit heavy-footed, starts getting a little less snap on the shots, and it doesn't take much. It doesn't take many mistakes for Khabib to basically get control of the fight and basically maintain it. So those are the two biggest points you have to look forward
to. Who do you think is going to come out on top here? This is it's funny, man. Everybody keeps asking me. I keep looking at it a couple of different ways. I think it's going to go one or two ways. For some reason, it feels like it's going to go one or two ways. Either Khabib is going to impose his will and punish McGregor for 5 rounds, or or a duration of 4 rounds and get a late finish, or Conor's going to weather a early pressure storm and then knock Khabib out 3rd or 4th round. That's kind of how I see it going. Why is it that people are staying so close to those two narratives instead of talking about this fight in a different way?
Because it's on Khabib's end, The simple fact of the matter is Khabib's entries and his exits, even into his takedowns, they're awful. They are worse than awful. That's an insult to people with awful entries. He is so easy to hit. His footwork is so bad. It is so bad going forward. Edson Barboza does not have good footwork. Anybody who pressures Edson Barboza can get to him. Khabib had a hard time getting to him. He had a hard time catching Edson Barboza, whose footwork is terrible. And worse yet, he actually had takedown attempts. Edson Barboza got off the cage against Khabib. The same unstoppable Khabib wants to get you against the fence. Edson Barboza got off the fence 2 or 3 times. Edson Barboza stuffed a couple takedowns. Khabib's so limited, and he depends so much on pressure and physicality and rushing in and overwhelming you, that people are saying Conor's a precision counterpuncher. If you're going to do that to him, we've seen better strikers try that and get iced. Guys with great chins get put away with 1 or 2 shots. So if Khabib's going to do that, the automatic answer is Conor just going to counter him and wipe him off the board. On the behalf of Conor, people are saying, I've seen Conor get tired against Nate. I've seen Conor get trapped on the fence by Alvarez. We've seen Conor kind of fade and get sloppy at times. And they're just figuring that Conor has really no ground game, which I don't believe. So they can't imagine a world where Conor can defend a takedown, Conor can get a reversal, or Conor can get back to his feet once Khabib takes him down. Basically, people are, to a certain degree, everybody's underestimating the fighters. They don't think that they have enough depth to their game. Now, to be fair, I don't think Khabib has a striking game at all. His ability to bridge distances with strikes isn't really great. His striking is not very great. So, to me, the idea that Khabib can't do anything on the feet is a lot closer to the truth than saying that Conor can't do anything on the ground. Now, he can't wrestle with Khabib, but as far as all-out grappling, I don't think Conor is nearly as bad as people think they are. But essentially, people think you have 2 one-dimensional fighters, and if they can't dominate in their one dimension, they have no chance of winning. That's essentially it. Khabib's a grappler, Conor's a striker. If he can't knock him out, he can't win. If Khabib can't take him down and control him for the majority of 5 rounds, he can't win either. That's essentially it. We put him into striking grappler class, and we don't think they're capable of anything else. And I think that's a mistake that people are making.
I can definitely agree with you there too. Definitely agree.
Getting tapped out by Nate Diaz doesn't mean you can't grapple. A lot of black belts have been tapped out by Nate Diaz. That doesn't mean you can't grapple. Vincent Henderson didn't want to engage in grappling with Nate Diaz, so you can't take that as an insult towards Conor. Like, you got tapped out by Nate. Is that supposed to be insulting? That's like saying I got taken down by Daniel Cormier. He's really good at that. So that's a possibility that happens.
Very true. It's a strong possibility that it happens. I think what's interesting is that Khabib doesn't look for the submission so much. He likes to beat people up, and I think that that's what's going to be most interesting for me when this fight hits the ground.
I'm just very curious to see what happens if he actually gets hurt. We've never seen Khabib face real adversity. Even that Michael Johnson fight, he didn't really catch him all that clean. I want to know what happens when he comes in full speed, he eats a counter shot, and it stops him in his tracks. Is he still going to pressure? It's easy to pressure when you're not getting hurt. It's easy to pressure when a guy's afraid to punch you. What are you going to do when a guy's willing to plant his feet and light you up? Like, what are you going to do then? We've never seen him hurt. Will he crack? Will he be frustrated? I mean, look at Ronda Rousey. She took some shots, but she was always able to get her hands on somebody. Once somebody could stay away from her for even a little bit and kind of pick away at her, all of a sudden the same Ronda who took shots from all these people was stumbling around off of jabs, getting busted up off jabs and weak straight lefts and straight rights. You know, we just have no idea how Khabib's going to respond to any adversity. I'm not saying he won't surpass it, but we have no idea. We don't know what it's like for him to be in a tough fight. And even though I've seen Conor lose tough fights, I've at least seen him fight to the point of exhaustion. I've seen him fight through it before. I have no idea what Khabib's going to do if Conor drops him early, or if he can't dominate, or he can't take Conor down left and right. Mentally, he might break. Everybody says he can't be broken. Anybody can say that when everything goes your way. And Ngannou was great and tough when everything went his way. Ronda was great and tough when everything went her way. Holly Holm was great and tough when everything went her way. So was Hen and Barao. But what happened when they started facing some adversity? Most of them lost and they were never the same again. And if you tell me that can't happen with Khabib, I just can't take you seriously. You can't tell me that definite because you've never seen him really rocked or really stunned. You've never had to see him really work. What happens if he has to?
That's very true there, man. The only other fight I want to cover for tonight is the co-main event. We've had a good conversation. We've been on for a little while. I don't want to stay on for too long. But the co-main event between Tony Ferguson and Anthony Pettis. This is a key fight for both men because Ferguson, if he wins, he should be deemed the next guy for the winner of Nurmagomedov versus McGregor. But if he loses, I think he's out of that consideration. Anthony Pettis, I don't see him as a top contender for either one of these two guys, but this is a big win for him in that position as well. What do you think about this fight here, and who do you see coming out on top?
One thought, we don't know Khabib. Khabib's not guaranteed to make weight. Let's not assume that's a guarantee. So one of these guys may be fighting for the title on Saturday, no matter what they tell us.
Good point.
So that's one thing. Secondly, this is a good matchup for Pettis. A lot of people are going to say it's not, but Tony Ferguson, a lot of his strength is his durability. Physically, his body doesn't break down, and he sets a high pace. That's why he can give up positions, give up takedowns, because he can go in those Granby rolls and those crazy scrambles, because he's got endless amounts of energy. He hasn't been active. He hasn't fought in, close to a year now, and he's coming off a major injury. There's no guarantee his cardio is going to be there. You don't know how his body is going to react when somebody's hitting him power. And though Pettis is somewhat limited as a striker, he's dynamic, but he's limited. There's one thing Pettis does, and he hits very, very hard. Kicks and punches very, very hard. That's the first issue. Second issue is Tony Ferguson, in his style, he tries to break you. So he attacks you with your strength. He'll attack Anthony's feet, and he'll willingly engage with Anthony. He'll get into extended grappling exchanges. Anthony Pettis is still one of the better finishers in mixed martial arts when it comes to matching with submission. Tony Ferguson's whole style is taking chances and trying to break you. So he's going to give Anthony both chances to land power shots so that he can have submission to hit him. He'll give up top over, he'll give up a takedown, he can attack you with submission. He'll dive for your legs and try and spin into a leg lock just so he can try something new. All those things are going to give Anthony still one of the better finishers.
Break it up a little bit there.
I'm sorry. That's all the chance he needs. He just needs someone to give him an opening. Tony Ferguson is a fighter who constantly gives people openings. He's one of the most balanced and well-rounded and intelligent fighters, but he fights in the most unintelligent manner that almost guarantees he's going to get rocked, get dropped, or get taken down. He's done it the extent of his career, and he's doing it against a guy who can finish him at any moment. I think this is a good matchup for Anthony Pettis. The biggest concern is if Tony's on and he can maintain a pace in his physicality, then he'll just wear him out with pressure and activity. But even in doing so, he can't control himself. So I believe that Anthony can find it and finish him sometime within.
All right, sir. We've done a lot tonight. Had a great conversation with Mike Russell.
That was an excellent guest, by the way. Great job on that.
Yeah, thanks, man. I appreciate that. Had enough to cover on this event. I'm looking forward to this card here, man, because I think we're gonna have a hell of a lot to talk about next week. But with that in mind, man, let everybody know what you're working on and where they can find your work.
I just had an article come out on Severe MMA talking about the 4 reasons that Khabib's going to lose to Conor McGregor. I didn't talk about how Conor would beat him. I talked about how Khabib would lose. And instead of talking about his weaknesses, I looked at it from a bigger point of view of these are all the things we know about Khabib that are positives and that are strengths, and how they may work against him, against a guy who's not going to respond to the threats that Khabib poses in the same way that everybody else responds to him. So it's kind of it's giving you an analysis of how he's effective, but also giving you analysis of how that might be a weakness that could be used against him by the right opponent. And that was the article. That's the biggest thing I had coming out this week. I did an article of breaking down Random Marcos. You can find that on Combat Press. I wanted to do more articles, but my computer went down, so I'm kind of stuck for a little bit.
I can hear that, man. It's been a long week for me too, but I got some stuff coming out for ratings hopefully before the end of the week. And as always, I'm covering MMA, mixed martial arts, wrestling, football, same old shit. Just about
Soccer,
every day of the
badminton,
week.
lacrosse. What don't you cover?
Yeah, who knows right now, dude? Who knows? But with that in
I
mind,
expect to see you next to LeVar Ball on the JBA. Be like, this is Rafael Garcia covering the JBA. LeVar, what we got going on today?
that's basically what it's going to be. But with that in mind, man, we're going to go ahead and close it out, dude. Great show, great questions. Right. I appreciate your time tonight, and let's get back at it next week.
All right, man. You take it easy. Stay safe this weekend.
Have a good one, man.